Welcome viewers. Today I'll be discussing about the role of power control, politics and negotiation in deciding organizational structure. So in this discussion we will be discussing about the objectives like political processes in organizations. We will further define what is politics and power, the relationship between various factors influencing organizational politics and mechanism to minimize politics. Further, we will go deeper into discussion of power control assumptions about organizational decision making, explaining the power control model of how structure emerge. We will discuss about the power control interpretation of technology and environment's role on structure, explaining power control view of structural change, predicting the degree of complexity, formalization and centralization that those in power prefer. Political processes in organizations. Politics, like power, is intangible and difficult to measure and very hard to observe. Most of the managers have a negative view towards politics and they believe that politics hurt an organization in achieving its goals. A political behavior is common in all organizations. Political behavior occurs more often than at the top level of an organization and around certain issues and decisions such as structural change. Therefore, it is important to explore what political behavior is, when it should be used, the type of issues and decisions most likely to be associated with politics, and some political tactics that may be effective. We will further discuss about politics. Politics involves deception and dishonesty for purposes of self-interest, which leads to conflict in the work environment. It is a widespread phenomena in organizational processes for resolving differences between organizational interest groups. Politics is the process of bargaining and negotiation that is used to overcome the conflicts. In this view, politics is similar to the coalition building decision processes. Political behavior can be either positive or negative force, and politics is use of power to get things accomplished, whether good things as well as bad. Uncertainty and conflict are natural and inevitable. Politics allows decisions to be made that otherwise might be stalemated or unsolvable. Now, what is political process? Political activity plays an important role in most of the organizations in the form of structural change, management succession, resource allocation. Let us understand how does it play an important role in the structural change. While reorganization or structural change happens, which strikes power and authority relationship, which affect underlying power base from strategic contingencies. Managers bargain and negotiate for responsibilities and power, and management succession, like hiring decisions, can generate uncertainty, discussions, and disagreements. Managers can use hiring and promotion to strengthen network of alliances and coalitions by putting their own people in better positions, in prominent positions. Then third factor is resource allocation, which decisions required for organizational performance, salaries, operating budgets, employees, offices, office facilities, equipments have been allocated to people, and there also politics plays an important role. Resources are vital. The disagreement about the priorities exist, and political processes help resolve the dilemma. Former WorldCom CEO Bernard Ebbers and CFO Scott Sullivan and other executives perpetrated one of the largest cases of accounting fraud in the history by using assertiveness, information control, and other influence practices as political tactics to protect their financial interest. Organizational politics is the behavior that others perceive as self serving tactics for personal gains at the expense of other people and possibly the organizations. Politics is nothing but power in action. Political behavior are the activities that are not required as part of one's formal role in the organization, but that influence or attempt to influence the distribution of advantages or disadvantages within the organization. There is legitimate political behavior, normal everyday politics, complaining, bypassing, obstructing uh, rules, regulations. Illegitimate political behavior is something which is extreme political behavior which violates the implied rules of the game, like sabotage, whistleblowing, and symbolic protest. Political behavior is the activity that are not required as part of one's formal role in the organization, but it influences or attempts to influence the distribution of advantages or disadvantages within the organization. So the reality of politics is it is natural result of resource scarcity. Why does it happen? Because there are resource crunch in organizations. Avenues or positions are limited. Limited resources lead to competition, and this results in political behavior. Judgment on quality differ markedly based on observers' perception. Blaming others, fixing responsibility, covering your rear, or documenting decisions, being perfectionist or attentive attention to details. Most decisions are made over ambiguous conditions, like lack of observed standards, encourage political maneuvering of subjective reality. So, what is the cause and consequence of political behavior? Let us understand what are the factors that influence political behavior. Individual level, there are several factors. Organizational factors also influence political behavior in the organizations from the level of low to high, and which will result in favorable outcomes like rewards or averted punishments. So, let us understand what is the individual behavior which has influenced the political behavior, maybe in the low, moderate, or high level. Individual factors are high self monitors, internal locus of control, uh, organizational investments, then you have perceived job alternatives, and expectation of success. Organizational factors are reallocation of resources, promotional opportunities or opportunities for promotion or upward enhancement, low, low trust or lack of trust, role ambiguity, unclear performance when the performance standards are not very clear. So, there is likely chance of politics to happen in the organization. Unclear performance evaluation system, zero sum reward practices, democratic decision making, high performance pressure, and self serving senior managers. Factors that influence political behavior, individual level factors are high self monitors, internal locus of control, high match personalities, and organizational investments, perceived job alternatives, and expectation of success, which leads to political behavior. So, employees' responses to organizational politics, perceptions of organizational politics results in decreased job satisfaction, increased anxiety and stress, increased turnover, and reduced performance. Most of the employees have low to modest willingness to play politics and have following reactions to politics. People generally avoid politics unless there are dire situations or dire circumstances like scarcity of resources. When the positions are limited and when the urgency of completing assignments is very high, so people tend to adopt political behavior. Perception of organizational politics results in decreased job satisfaction when people assume or people perceive that there is manipulation or political behavior existing in the organization. This results in low job satisfaction. It results in anxiety and stress. If there is a hardworking individual and he perceives that there is politics or political behavior being adopted in the organization, be it in promotion, be in allocation of resources, in rewards, or in giving a promotion, so there is increased anxiety and high stress amongst the employees. Increased turnover, perceived injustice will always lead to increased turnover. People tend to leave those organizations, which will also ultimately lead to reduced performance. There are certain conditions of organizational politics, like conditions which are supporting organizational politics, like tolerance for politics. Some organizations, there is politics existing, but there is a tolerance for politics. People ignore. Generally, people in power, they tend to adopt political behavior, they tend to favor few people and ignore others. So, in that case, there is a tolerance when people do not have any other alternative available, so they tend to tolerate politics. Resource scarcity, when the resources are very few, the organization will have political behavior prevailing. Complex and ambiguous decisions, when the decisions are not very clear, when the rules are not very clear, which will again create political behavior amongst the employees or the management. Organizational change, when organizations adopt change or when the circumstances are so that the organization has to incorporate, adopt new technology, there is a kind of massive structural change, business process re-engineering. So, in that case, this is also one of the conditions which is supporting organizational politics. How to minimize political behavior? Political behavior prevalent in the organizations can be minimized by proper care and concern of managers, introducing clear rules, guidelines, so that people will adopt the norms, procedures which are well laid down in the organizations, formal rules and regulations. Free flowing information, when the information is not withheld few people, but information is available across the organization to all levels of employees, so then there will be reduced political behavior. Managing change effectively, when change is managed effectively by the top management and the uncertainty prevailing during the organizational change is well managed, when the information is clear, rules are well placed and the change is effectively managed, so there will be reduced political behavior. Managing team norms, every organization has certain norms, regulations are very clear. So, in that case, managing team norms will also reduce the political behavior. Support values that oppose politics. The organization has strong value system like supporting individuals for their trustworthiness, honesty. So, those organizations where there are very fair rules, regulations, fairness perception is very high. So, in that case, the value system will oppose political behavior. Leaders as role models. If leaders and their value system, leaders are very clear in their attitude, leaders have always supported managing the rules, regulations, in that case also the political behavior can be minimized. Defensive behavior is another factor, like employees who perceive politics as a threat have a defensive reaction. When people perceive that the prevailing politics will deter their performance, will deter their progress in the career progress, so they adopt a defensive behavior, defensive mechanism, which may be helpful in the short run, but it will be dangerous in the long run. There are different types of defensive behavior like avoiding action, overcoming, buck passing, playing dumb, stalling, and avoiding the blames like bluffing, playing safe, justifying, scapegoating, avoiding change like prevention, self protection, etc. Allocation of power in an organization is not very random. Power is the result of organizational processes that can be understood, and to a degree it can also be predicted. The ability to reduce uncertainty, increase dependency on one's own department, obtain resources, cope with the strategic contingencies will all enhance a department's power. So, using power, politics, and collaboration, as power is exercised through political behavior of individuals, individual managers have to negotiate in the decision making, adopt tactics to acquire and use power, Managers increase their cooperation, collaboration within the organization to reduce demanding conflicts. So, there are various tactics to increase the power base, like enter areas of high uncertainty, create dependencies, or provide scarce resources, satisfy the strategic contingencies. Political tactics for using power is build coalition and expand networks, assign loyal people for key positions, and control decision premises, enhance legitimacy and expertise, make a direct appeal. There are also various tactics for enhancing collaboration, like create integration devices, confrontation and negotiation, schedule intergroup consultation, practice member rotation, and create shared mission and super goals. It helps us to understand how power is exercised through adopting a political behavior and how individual managers can negotiate decision making and adopt tactics to acquire and use power. There are certain other tactics for increasing the power, like enter areas of high uncertainty, which means that one source of department power is to cope with critical uncertainty. Create dependencies, that means when the organization depends on a department for information, for resources, for materials, for human capital, knowledge, or skill, that department will hold power over others. That department is more influential than the other department. Providing scarce resources. Departments which have accumulated resources and they provide them to an organization in the form of finance, information, or facilities will be considered to be more powerful. So, there is a kind of a dependency between one department and another department because of the resource power with one particular department. Satisfy strategic contingencies. Some elements in the external or internal environment which are important for success, like technology can be one of the success factors, or infrastructure, or machinery, or in some cases it can be human capital. So, contingency could be a critical event, a task for which there is no substitute, or a central task that is independent, that is interdependent with many others in the organization. So, these are various tactics for increasing the basis of power. Now, talking about the power control mechanism. The power control view, it suggests that power is the capacity to have control over others, to influence others, and which has a significant impact on the behavior, relationship, and other organizational dynamics. So, it is an organization structure, power to select structure to maximize degree possible, maintain and enhance their control. And power control view also states that positive implications of power control can be to facilitate coordination and performance and promote actions and goal attainment. It also enhances well being and confidence of people, confers credibility. Let us understand how does it facilitate coordination and performance. Power helps in establishing order and it facilitates coordination, enhances group and organizational performance. It promotes action and goal attainment, like uh, powerful individuals are often more proactive. They, because of access to information, because of access to resources, they take a proactive decision. They are taking decisions much in advance. Their target is to achieve organizational objectives. This enhances well being and confidence of individuals. Elevated power or access to power is associated with increased happiness. If somebody has finance or is having knowledge as a power, referent power, is always happy, optimistic, his self esteem or motivation is very high, and authentic self expression in the power holder. There is lot of confidence, there is optimism if somebody has power. It confers credibility. People with power are generally considered to be reliable. They are considered to be someone who is more credible, reliable, which can aid in effective communication and decision making. Power comes due to their authority, due to their legitimate positions. Then negative implications of power is leads to corruption and unethical behavior, decreased empathy and perspective taking. It leads to aggressiveness and dehumanization, resentment and resistance, and it also leads to poor decision making. I will speak about how corruption and unethical behavior is caused due to power, excessive power. Power can lead to feeling of entitlement. Somebody feels very or proud when some power is being given. Self righteousness, propensity to act unethically, exploit others generally happens when people are blind with power, breaking rules for personal gains. This generally happens when individuals have power and they are blind, folded with excessive power. They think that they have access, they enjoy the authority and they can violate rules. Decreased empathy and perspective taking. Power holders may experience less empathy and compassion for others. They hinder effective social interaction, which they also create barriers in interacting with others and cooperating other and also giving cooperation to other individuals. Aggression and dehumanization. Elevated power can promote overconfidence and increased tendency to disregard other individuals or act aggressively towards those with less power. Resentment and resistance. Use of excessive power, coercion, or manipulation of power leads to fear, stress, and sometimes leading to resentment, increased absenteeism, rebellion amongst the subordinates or followers. Poor decision making, power can increase illusion of control and overconfidence, which causes individuals to ignore expert advice. So, in essence, the power control view highlights that while power is necessary ingredient for organization for achievement of goals or completion of action, its implication depends heavily on how it is wielded, who wields power, and the most effective outcome arise when the power is in balance or comes with responsibility. There is ethics and focus on collective well-being. The tactics which has been adopted for enhancing cooperation and collaboration. So power and political tactics are important means of getting things done within organizations. Most organizations today have least moderate inter-unit conflict. Uh, an additional approach in many organizations is to overcome conflict by stimulating cooperation, collaboration between departments to support the attainment of organizational goals. The tactics to enhance collaboration include create integration devices, labor management teams use confrontation and negotiation, schedule intergroup consultations, practice member rotation. Members should be given positions in different departments, they should be given new roles so they keep moving from one job to another job so that they develop a kind of collaboration. So, these are various tactics for enhancing collaboration, create a shared mission and superordinate goals. Further, how we can create integration or devices, teams, task forces, projects, project managers who span the boundaries or who collaborate between different departments can be used for integration purpose, bringing together representatives from different departments, conflicting departments in uh, joint problem solving teams or in cross functional teams is an effective way to enhance cross functional collaboration because representatives learn and understand each other's point of view. They understand or empathize with other members' problems. Sometimes a full time integrator is assigned to achieve cooperation and collaboration while meeting with members of the respective departments to exchange information, to exchange communication, and the integrator has to understand each group's problems, empathize with other departments' issues, and must be able to move both groups towards a common solution which is mutually agreeable. Teams and task forces, they try to reduce conflict and enhance cooperation because they integrate problems from different departments. They look at the perspectives of other departments and the problems they would have experienced. So integration devices can be used to enhance cooperation between labor and management. Whenever there is a issue or there are problems with the labor and management, if there are representatives, task forces, they try to understand and resolve those issues. Confrontation and negotiation. Confrontation and negotiation occurs when parties in conflict with each other understand and engage each other's problems. They try to work out the differences, be it the professional differences or the personal differences. Negotiation is a bargaining process that occurs during the confrontation and which enables the parties to systematically reach out a solution. Negotiation techniques, these techniques bring appointed representatives from departments together to work on a serious dispute or a problem. Confrontation and negotiation involve some sort of risk, and there is no guarantee that discussions will focus on a conflict or emotions will not get out of hand. However, if members are able to resolve the conflict, they are on the basis of face to face interaction, they will find respect for each other and try to establish future collaboration, and the beginning of permanent attitude change are possible through direct negotiation. So if we want to bring in attitudinal change in conflicting parties, there has to be a face to face interaction. Confrontation and negotiation are more likely to be successful when managers engage in a win win strategy. That means both sides adopt a positive attitude and strive to resolve the conflict in way that will benefit each other. Other type of negotiation used to resolve a disagreement between workers and management is referred to as collective bargaining, which is a process which is accomplished through union and results in agreement. Then scheduled intergroup consultation, which when conflict is intense and enduring and the department members are not very cooperative. Top managers may intervene as third parties to resolve the conflict or bring in third party consultants from outside organizations called workplace mediation is a strong intervention to reduce conflict. The technique has been developed by psychologists like Robert Blake, Morton, and Richard Walton. There is another method called practice member rotation, which means rotation means individuals from one department will be working in another department on a temporary or on a permanent basis. So, individuals become submerged in the values, attitude, problems, and goals of the other department. They understand and empathize with the issues at the primary department. They can explain the problems and goals to their original departments to their new colleagues. And this enables a frank, accurate exchange of views and information. Rotation work slowly to reduce conflict, but it is very effective for changing the underlying attitude and perception that promote conflict. What are negotiation strategies? We understand that negotiation tactics or strategies can be win-win or win-lose strategies. Win-win strategy defines the conflict and the mutual problems. They understand by discussion the mutual problems or the problems can be understood mutually. Pursue joint outcomes. They can think of what could be the win-win outcome for both the groups that satisfy both the groups. Both the parties should agree to the consensus and be open, honest, and accumulate communication through the group needs, communicating the group needs or goals and proposals. They should avoid threats to reduce the other's defensiveness. Communicate flexibility of position. Win lose strategy depends on certain ways, like where the problem is defined and a win lose as a win lose situation. Pursue own group's outcome and force the other group into submission. Be decideful, be adopt manipulation or decisiveness. inaccurate and misleading in communicating the group's needs, goals, and proposals, use coercion or power or threat mechanism or control mechanism to force other group to submit, and communicating strong commitment like rigidity, being very rigid regarding one's own position. So, win lose strategy adopts power or control mechanism. One department becomes very rigid and they take decisions based on their goals or achievement of or their self interest. Strategic choice perspective in uh, in an organizational theory or organizational context, the strategic choice perspective, as proposed by John Child in 1972, posits the power holders actively decide on an organization's structure and strategic course, as opposed to those elements being purely dictated by environmental factor or contingency. So they say that the people in power, they take active decision as to what should be the structure and the strategy of organization despite prevalence of environmental factors, or they completely ignore or the environmental factors as opposed to the elements being purely dictated by environment. So the agreement of power control involves a political process where the power holders use influence to shape the organization to their self interest. There is a logic of strategic choice. What is that? Decision makers who enjoy power or who have more autonomy than that inferred by those arguing to the dominance of environmentalist, technological, or other forces. Organizations' effectiveness should be construed as a range instead of a point. Organizational effectiveness is not optimum point of achievement, and occasionally those who have power to manipulate and control their environment. Those individuals who are in positions, those who have power, they manipulate and control the environment and take decisions accordingly. Organizations are not always pawns being acted upon by their environment. So, the power logic of strategic choice, but perceptions and evaluation of events are very important intervening link between environment and actions of organization. The case or the situation which has been discussed against the strategic choice is the strategic choice agreement is restricted by two facts. What is that? Communication lock an organization into a limited domain. Okay, barriers to entry in the new market constrain managers from doing much with their discretionary attitude. So, situation which talks about the strategic choice perspective or the case against the strategic choice perspective overemphasizes the role of power and discretion of top managers. They give more importance to the top managers and the people who bestow power and underestimates the significance of external factors or external environment, institutional context and internal power dynamics. So, this view gives an argument against the strategic choice theory, environmental and institutional determinism. It talks about their critics. The critics argue that an organization's choice are preordained by environmental conditions, that is market dynamics, resource availability and government regulations. The strategic choice model risks falling back into determinism and does not account external pressure. They completely ignore what is the external pressure. Neglect of power dynamism. Early concepts of strategic choice were ignoring the role of power, emotion and decision making processes. The theory assumes role of political connoted organizational reality in decision making. It underestimates or it understands organizational reality with differing interest of individuals from the viewpoint of cultural schema. Then the third point is constrained rationality. The approach emphasizes on limits of strategic choice due to constrained rationality, which means incomplete information. Decision makers often face high levels of uncertainty and are subject to certain biases, cognition or cognitive biases like groupthink, and which affects the quality and rationality of their choices. So, these are certain cases against the strategic choice perspective. Focus on short term goals like the pressure to deliver short term results, like boosting stock prices through buybacks, cost cutting, can overshadow the importance of long term strategic objective, leading to potentially detrimental long term consequence. Path dependency, like the theory which has been criticized for not adequately considering the path dependency, the idea that an organization's past choice, past history significantly interferes or influences and limits the current and future options. There is also overemphasis on the top down control, which means by focusing on the strategic apex decision, the theory may neglect the discretionary behavior and influence of middle managers and lower level employees who can also shape outcomes through informal processes or subcultures. So, there is overemphasis on the top down control. Rigidity and lack of adaptation. Strategic choice decisions, especially if too formal or rigid, might interfere, might hinder or create barriers in innovation and creativity, and make the organizations slow to adapt to rapidly changing conditions or unexpected events. So, we will finally discuss about what are the challenges to contingency perspective. Contingency perspective is committed to rationality, and the dominant coalition and top managers are assumed to be one and the same. The decision makers, they share a common perspective, common purpose, and contingency variables, technology, and environment. These are certain challenges to contingency perspective like non-rationality, divergent interest, dominant coalition, and power. Now, what is the interplay of interest? Interplay of interest is the context in organizational theory, structure, and design, which refers to the dynamic interaction between conflicts and alignment among various stakeholders, like who seek to influence organizations' goals, processes, and ultimate outcomes. Like in the organizational theory context, which provides the lens through which we understand these elements, like contingency theory, which recognizes that there is no single structure is optimal in all situations. There is no one size fits all strategy. Instead, the best design depends on the internal factors, the external factors, the interplay, which involves balancing the needs of different departments, interest groups, technologies, and environment to achieve optimal effectiveness. Stakeholder theory argues that organizations must consider the interest of all the stakeholders, all the groups which can affect in some way or the other or are affected by the operations of organizations. They are not just shareholders, but all the stakeholders have an equal say in the organization and its performance. So, this includes employees, customers, suppliers, community members, and government bodies. Systems theory, this perspective views organization as an open social system with where various interdependent subsystem, individuals, groups, departments interact for organizational performance. So, the interplay of interests is very essential for managing the entire system and harnessing synergy among components. Structure and design, and how do we manage the interplay? Structure and design are practical mechanisms which are used to manage complex interplay of interest. Power and politics, interests are often associated with power dynamics within the organization. Power is ability to influence others to achieve desired outcome. Politics involved using informal tactics, informal methods to protect or advance self interest of an individual. So, these dynamics, both power and politics, significantly influence decision making and mostly in allocation of resources, rewards, uh, information, etc. Formalization and hierarchy. Formal structures, hierarchies, and clear job descriptions are certain attempts to create order and align individual interest with organizational goals. However, excessive formalization can stifle the innovation, adaptability, leading to different, potentially conflicting interests emerging in the organization. Coordination and integration talks about organizational design, which involves creating mechanisms for collaboration, coordination, integration to manage the diverse interests which have arisen from specialized tasks and departments. So, this coordination and integration helps in aligning various parties to work collaboratively, to work towards common goal and avoid conflict. What is decision making? Decision making and its relationship with conflict. The diverse interests often lead to conflicts. The competing interest of departments, competing interest of individuals can lead to conflicts. And the design of an organization's decision making process, whether centralized, decentralized, autocratic, or participative, determines how this conflict can be resolved and whose interest prevails. Effective managers must be aware of this interplay of conflicting interest, political behavior, and the conditions that allow employees to perform while balancing the needs of all stakeholders, balancing the interest of all stakeholders, how to accommodate them so that there is a win win strategy. In summary, organizational theory helps conceptualize the presence of multiple or competing interests, while structure and design offers the tools and frameworks managers used to navigate and align. So, there are varied interests of organizational effectiveness. Implications based on the power control view, technology and environment, stability and mechanistic structure, complexity, formalization and centralization. What is the implication of power control for each factor? Technology and environment. Routine technology and stable environment favors a mechanistic structure with high centralization and formalization to maintain control. When there is a non-routine technology and dynamic environment, require an organic structure which allows for more flexibility and employee autonomy to adapt quickly to change. Similarly, in the stability and mechanistic structure, if we see in a stable environment, a mechanistic structure is seen as a mechanism for control. The power control view suggests that a clear hierarchy, a centralized decision making, and formal rules regulations are used generally to ensure employees consistently follow procedures which are more preferred, predicted. And this structure is efficient for tasks that do not require constant adaptation. Complexity as technology and task becomes more complex. So, there is need for integration between individuals and groups. When the task is very complex, it leads to shift from centralization and formalization for innovation and quick decision making uh, to solve the problems quickly. Formalization, high formalization is key tool for control, is a mechanist in a mechanistic structure. It aims to standardize behavior, reduce discretion, and ensure that the tasks are performed in a predictable manner. However, excessive formalization can also create barriers to adapt and solve problems. Centralization is a direct mechanism or a measure where power resides at the top of hierarchy, and in power control view this is primary way to maintain control over organizations direction and actions. In the power control view, this is a fundamental way or a primary way to maintain control over organizations direction and action. As tasks become more complex or environment is highly dynamic, centralized control can diminish leading to decentralization or more power given to people in the different levels or who are directly dealing with the clients. So, there is more power given. So, to conclude, power conclusion, power control assumptions about organizational decision making. We have discussed about politics, power and negotiation. We have also covered power control model of how structures emerge. We have identified power control assumptions about organizational decision making, distinguish between power and authority, politics, explaining the power control model of how structures emerge, and explaining the power control view of structural change, predicting degree of complexity, formalization, centralization, and those in power, how they prefer adopting power. Thank you.